I was going to look at the last Epoch. I want you guys to put some respect on this man's name. On a fateful day, literally 10 fucking years ago, Kripparrian, the night before the patch came out to nerf Inferno mode, Kripparrian went and killed Diablo on hardcore Inferno with Krippy, his friend. And they were the only two people in the world to ever accomplish this. And nobody was ever able to beat it because it was nerfed the next morning. This is the guy who we're going to be listening to what he's got to say.
Hey guys, how's it going? Kripparrian here. Today I want to give you guys just a bit of a talk about Last Epoch. Now this is a game that I didn't really play that much before it had its like 1.0 like official release.
Yeah, I didn't play it at all.
And some change ago. And a lot of people have been asking me what I think about the game, but I didn't really want to make this video until I felt like pretty comfortable that I understand the game on a fairly deep level to properly, you know, give you guys this information. So overall, how good do I think Last Epoch is? I think it is very good.
Damn.
It
all
does
right.
kind of go in between PoE and Diablo, which is how a lot of reviewers have placed the game.
Naturally.
Just a lot of reviewers have placed the game kind of in between the two, presumably like in the middle. I would say it's very much not in the middle between those two games.
Really?
I think it is a lot closer to PoE in the way that the game is kind of like carefully designed. Like the min in the game, the details, they are extremely fine-tuned, except for a few examples, of course. And it is like Diablo in the fact that you can just pick up the game and play it at your own will.
Yeah, so, I think what people really mean by that is saying that the game's complexity is in between PoE and Diablo. But I do think that, it's probably closer to PoE than it is to Diablo. That's true.
It has a really high level of complexity. Every different class is different. For better or worse, some of them are certainly better and some of them are certainly worse. The classes just have a very different thing about each one. Even though there is kind of like the subclass that you start the game off with, kind of branching out into three. Usually those three play very differently, except for a few examples, unless you really want to kind of push it out and do a very similar build. And while it has a lot of complexity on the top end, like the classes, to really understand the best combinations that you should be using, actually you have to do a fair amount of research and looking into things. Which
I remember whenever I looked up and I tried to figure out my build, like, my damage doubled, and my survivability also doubled. But I think that's generally what happens with any of these games, and it's not even really a bad thing whenever knowing more about the game makes you better at the game.
Great for someone like me, because I love figuring out and making my own builds in these type of games. But the reason it's a game that is approachable, like Diablo 4, for example, is because the game doesn't really scale your character that crazy. So in Path of Exile, we have this thing where defenses are extremely tightly tuned. There's no item in the game that like doubles your effective health in PoE. There may be like one or two in very specific builds that basically build into those items. And again, very, very few.
Sure.
In Diablo, there's items that like quadruple the effective health of your character.
Well, I think that's definitely true. Like in Diablo 4, like you can make your character so tanky, it's insane.
It's easy to get one. You just get a chest piece that has 4 defensive stats, and then you get a shield that has 4 defensive stats for another quadruple, and then you get a leggings with 4 defensive stats and another quadruple. And while they have tried to kind of tighten the knobs on damage in Diablo 4, they haven't really been very successful at doing that. And
just like they haven't been successful at balancing the tuning knobs for any damage in any game that they've ever made. But yes, that's true.
4 is pretty casual because they make the game as a baseline pretty easy, and they do that because they haven't really finely tuned the balance on either offense or defense for a character. So that's why when you play Diablo 4, you can just play whatever junk build you want because the baseline difficulty of the game is low. So that's why.
Yeah, the game's really easy, so it doesn't really matter what you do. I think that really it's better to have a difficult game where you have to like fight and you have to like really know what you're doing. But it's mainly about like I think that the one thing that PoE does that I don't like is the fact that PoE makes it to where making bad decisions punishes you in ways that are beyond just the fail state of that decision. Like it costs a lot of money to respec, stuff like that. That's the bad stuff about PoE. But if you were able to respec and make decisions, you know, whenever you wanted, then it would be fine. PoE decisions are important. Decisions are important, but decisions being important is sometimes a bad thing. Like, for example, for a new player or a person who's trying to experiment, decisions being important means that they can't take risks and learn on their own, and they have to rely on other people who have already done it to tell them what to do. Because again, whenever you punish players for taking risks, players will take less risks. And the more that you punish players for taking risks, the more ways that players will prevent themselves from being punished. It's really just that simple.
Consider Diablo 4 a pretty casual game. Path of Exile, the baseline difficulty of the game
it's very
is
hard.
Quite high for someone that hasn't played it before.
True.
It's extremely high for anyone that tries to play the game without looking up some information about the build they're willing to play. So where does Last Epoch fit into these things? Last Epoch, I say, has about as much control over defenses as PoE. I think if they fine-tune the ward mechanic, it would actually be even more finely tuned than PoE in terms of defenses. And in terms of damage, it's also very finely tuned. I would say that Last Epoch has finely tuned. There's no like super crazy damage scaler, again, except for very few instances, outliers that are probably going to be addressed.
Yeah.
But for the most part, characters are not going to do million times more damage a few levels later. Okay, that's not.
There's not as much weird scaling problems that, like, for example, Diablo has. That's definitely
how
true.
Last Epoch works. And because you have a lot of complexity in the characters, the fact that the multipliers don't go too crazy for offense and they don't go too crazy for defense, it means that you can just play whatever trash build you want, and it's really not going to be that bad. Because even though you might be doing everything wrong, your character might be like half as tanky and do like a third of the damage, but not like 1,000,000 times less damage like Diablo, and not 100 times less tanky or damage like PoE.
Well, I think also, like, more than that is that making mistakes isn't punished as much. And I think that's probably the biggest reason why I think Last Epoch is good, is because it allows people to have a more in-depth ARPG experience without necessarily locking them into choices and then punishing them for experimentation.
Because of that, it's a game.
And by the way, keep in mind, I do like PoE. I think PoE right now is still a better game than Last Epoch. I do. I still think it's a better game. However, I think Last Epoch is a great game, and they can both exist in the same universe. And I hope that Last Epoch will give PoE insight into how people play games more in another world, and maybe PoE can learn from them, and then, of course, Last Epoch, of course, will learn from PoE. That's the best thing about a free market.
Satisfies people who love the complexity in
I think it's great.
ARPGs like myself, and it satisfies people who just kind of want to play the game at their own pace. This is a game where you absolutely can do both, and they've been extremely careful to kind of craft the mechanics in the game for people to be able to do this. And honestly, it's really impressive.
Yeah.
I think that's why the game has done so well at launch. They had over 200,000 players. I think that's why the game has done pretty well whenever.
And also, like, as somebody who played PoE on release, the campaign for Last Epoch, I think, is about as good as the campaign for Diablo 4. It's about the same. And I think it's better than PoE's campaign was whenever it came out. Because, like, now, obviously, PoE has the 10 acts, but, like, that didn't happen until, like, years and years later.
I stream it. You guys seem to love me playing it.
Is that good?
And I love playing it. I think
it's super important to have a good campaign. Because the people that are going to play the game, they will bounce off the game before they finish the campaign. So, like, if your campaign is bad, then for them, your whole game is bad.
an awesome game. And overall, it's just a blast. It delivers on everything an ARPG should for the most part. The class identity, the fun and actually just playing, the flexibility to respec and try different abilities, the options to kind of tackle the content without feeling overwhelmed, even if you don't do a lot of the research. It's overall pretty good. There are some outliers, and I don't really know how big or active their dev team is, and I feel like
they're very
in cases
active,
like these, if outliers go unaddressed, it can kind of hurt the game over time. Like right now, they have a mechanic called Ward, which is pretty similar to
shield.
barriers in Diablo 4. It's kind of like temporary HP. Now, it's kind of like barriers in Diablo 4 because they last like a certain amount of time, and you can scale something called ward retention to make it degrade less. It's not like barriers where you put it up and it lasts 5 seconds. No, ward naturally decays. The more you have, the faster it decays. But the more ward retention you have, the slower that decay rate is. And there's certain abilities that just grant you ward. So if you're taking advantage of those abilities, you can have like 10 times the amount of health that you should have. And for last Epoch, that is an extreme outlier. So right now, I think
I think that's just usually how any game like this is going to be whenever it comes out. I mean, even Elden Ring, there were tons of like weird bugs and like weird exploits that you basically had. And like different imbalance issues, like Rivers of Blood was just like so powerful and so strong compared to a lot of other things. Like that golden halabardo that I had scaled with like every stat in the game. Like there's always going to be problems like this in games. And I think that it's natural. Yeah, Hoarfrost, the stomp.
Pretty well designed, for the one exception that I think it should have a cap based on a percentage of your health.
Max
I
health,
don't think ward should exceed double your health, for example. In a rare case, a rare W for Diablo 4, I think Diablo 4 had barrier mechanics right. I think temporary barriers are pretty cool. Last Epoch's take on temporary is even cooler, I would say. It's just the caps not existing in Last Epoch make it a pretty problematic mechanic overall. A lot of people have played Last Epoch like a ton this week, and some of them have said that they don't really kind of see the point in like going, crazy endgame. Like there isn't that much endgame in Last Epoch.
That's kind of the way that I felt. I felt like once I pretty much went through the monolith system and I played through it, I was like, okay, I'm pretty much good. I did the thing, I did the stuff, and like I had a good experience, right? I mean, it's not like I hated the game. I enjoyed the game. I played it a lot. I thought it was really fun. And then I stopped playing it. And I'll come back if they bring out a new season with like cool stuff. I'll come back. I'll play it again. So yeah, I mean, I had a great time. It was good. I mean, it's not a game that it doesn't have the level of complexity that PoE does that will give you like 2 months of content with building a character. But that's also a good thing for other people.
And that is the main concern that I've seen in the community. Overall, I think they are unfortunately correct. There isn't that much endgame in Last Epoch, but if someone really likes their character, really likes how it plays, or they really want to challenge themselves, Last Epoch has a system that appropriately rewards you for playing at a higher difficulty,
That's
which again
important.
is so rare in games these days. So they have kind of like the monolith system. It's kind of like
corrupted
maps.
Monoliths.
You kind of go node to node in a way, kind of like Delve and PoE. If you don't know what that is, that's fine. It's basically you go you hop like location to location. Each of these locations are varying difficulty, varying rewards, and you know what the big chest reward at the end will be. And when you do enough of these, you do the boss of that monolith. And there's 10 monoliths or something like that. So bosses, they're actually pretty cool, but usually the bosses are a little bit easier than the mobs in the nodes, and I'd say
the bosses aren't really that challenging, but I think that's the case with PoE too. Like outside of the Shaper Guardians and Elder Guardians and like the actual like real bosses, like the map bosses are usually really easy. Like I'm gonna be honest, I think that most of the map bosses are easy. Like maybe the Malachi where you fight him with piety, like that one can be kind of hard. But for the most part, I think most of them are easy.
that the bosses aren't quite as cool as they are in Path of
Kitava,
Exile.
I think Kitava is
They are
easy.
pretty much on the level of Diablo 4 in terms of coolness and mechanics and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So pretty good, but not really mind-blowing. They have said that their next big update will include like pinnacle bosses, and that is pretty exciting on one hand, but on the other, having challenged a lot of the monolith bosses that currently exist in the game, I would say that the timing for a lot of their abilities is a little bit off. And just to be clear, I play in offline mode, so it's not like the game is, their servers are lagging and then the boss didn't properly telegraph. No, it's
Imagine
like
offline
the boss
mode.
is going to drop the meteor and I get hit by the meteor before the animation of him actually dropping it happens.
Yeah, in my opinion, I think that's just bad design. Like, for me, I think that a hitbox being bad is very easy to understand. If your character is getting hit by something that it's not visibly in, it's bad. That's simple.
There's a few instances like that, and when we're talking about killing characters in one hit or almost in one hit, it's a little bit problematic if we scale that up to like a pinnacle level for bosses. So
you need
that
to have
might be a challenge, and I do hope they take that on well. Overall, the game is very cool. They also launched with kind of like the trade, and that has also been really well received. If you want the online experience and trade items and all that, you can have it. Their servers haven't really held up very well. That's where most of the complaints happen. I don't really have that much to say about that because I generally like to play ARPGs by myself these days.
That's what I do.
They have offline mode, which is actually really good. The files are saved kind of through your Steam, so it's not
It's crazy how they have offline mode. Did you guys know that was possible? That, like, you can actually play a video game without being connected to the internet? Yeah, I don't know how they did it back in the Super Nintendo days. Because, like, we didn't have internet back then. Like, what is this?
Like fully localized files. You can like play the game fully offline on your computer. Then you can do it on like your Steam Deck in a different location. And the locally saved files are actually saved on Steam. So you don't have to like copy your character files over or any of that. It's very well done. It's seamless. It's a full offline mode. So like, I don't know, next time Rania and I go on a trip, maybe I'll take my Steam Deck and play on the airplane.
There you go.
I mean, last time I went to Bermuda, didn't have screens on the airplane. Jesus, 2024, am I right? Anyway.
That's why I remember why we did this with Southwest Airlines, bro. Like, we went there, they didn't have the TVs there, bro. Like, that was the last time. We use Delta every time now.
So I thought that was a pretty fair compromise. Even though, their launch kind of tanked online, they didn't really expect that many people. They basically had like 8 times more people than the maximum of their stress test pre 1.0. And now that I know how awesome of a game it is, I am not surprised. But I guess it's pretty difficult for a fairly small company like theirs to take these things into account quite at that magnitude. Overall, I do absolutely recommend you guys try Last Epoch, especially if you're one to kind of try your take at making your own build, and especially if you just like learning an entirely new class each time you roll a new character. I think Last Epoch is 10 out of 10 on those two things in particular, and overall, I think I'd give the game right now an 8.5 out of 10. I think it is.
That's really good. I'm going to be honest. I think that is really fucking good.
Fantastic.
Is too much success bad?
I hope their future.
Well, the reality is, like, whenever you have a game and the game overperforms 4x better than what you had expected, and you're playing with online servers, and you're a new company, the reality is that you're probably not equipped to deal with that. That doesn't mean that it's okay, but it means that it's understandable.
Updates serve us well, and I probably will still play in the off times from time to time. Maybe I'll stream the game a little bit more. Right now we've got a Forge Night project, and I will do at least one more video coming up in the next few days where I go over my best creation, the Strength Stacked Beastmaster build. That is actually maybe one of the best builds in the game overall. So, hope you guys enjoyed this video. Hope you guys have been enjoying the Last Epoch streams, and we'll see you next time.
Yeah, I feel like people have been really happy about Last Epoch, and even now, as far as I know, there's still been a lot of people playing the game, right? Let me go and double check. So if you look at Last Epoch, how many people are actively playing Last Epoch? It still has 15,000 viewers. I would say that's really good. There it is. There's the video. I mean, this Crypt video is like actually, I think, very, very fair. Like, I agree with pretty much everything he was saying. Let me go over and I want to pull this up. Okay, so Last Epoch. Last Epoch. And this also, I'm not sure if it counts offline players as well. But as you can see, the game is still... Wow. Holy shit, this is... That's so successful. Oh my god. That is really, really, really good. What about Diablo 4? It's the worst it's ever been. It has never been worse than right now.